Yeah. Was it? Yeah.
Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and
Yeah, if you can make it fun.
all right. We're going to go ahead and call this special meeting order to business. Call to order. You can all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Molly, if you can help me with the roll call, please.
Alderperson Schaefer.
Here.
Alderperson Valdy.
Here.
Alderperson Dean.
Here.
Alderperson Grimmer.
Here.
Alderperson Price.
Here.
And then Alderperson Henry and Alderperson Eicher are excused. Mayor Atwell.
Present.
Administrator Hafner.
Here. Great, thank you very much. Okay, first order of business is citizens' comments. Are there any citizens that would like to come up to the mic and share some comments? If you do, come on up.
Susie Thompson, 700 Milwaukee Street. I wore this shirt today purposely. It's an owl because I want to know who is going to take responsibility and say, yes, we need our police, we need our firemen, and what would our community be if you call 911 and your house is burning down, or you have witnessed an accident, or somebody standing near you just had a heart attack. That could be me, because I do have a heart issue. If somebody calls 911 and we don't have the response because we don't have the people to back up our Lake Country Fire and Rescue, who is going to take the responsibility for the lack of that response? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come up and speak? Come on up.
Hello. Kay Machasovich, 1993 West Shore Drive.
Can you please spell your last name? And repeat the address.
Machasovich, it's Maciasowicz. It's 1993 West Shore Drive. I'm also speaking on behalf of, I want more firemen, permanent full-time firemen added to our roles here. Delafield is getting the nickname of Delafield because of all the developments, whether it's the Hendricks property, St. John's property, the 83 corridor. There's lots and lots more development all over the area. We need more services. I've had the misfortune or whatever of having to call 911 a couple of times over the years, and I had immediate response within minutes. And I want everybody that lives in this community to have that same ability to pick up that phone and get help when they need it. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up.
The folks at home can't hear you.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Bruce Newmiller. I live at 1313 Nagawicka Street. Been a resident of Delafield for probably about 40 years. So I've seen a lot of changes over time. I had the benefit of sitting in on Matt's presentation last Thursday, which I thought was done very well. As a business owner, I can say that the things that the fire department is experiencing today are a fact of the world we live in today, with getting employees and things like that. He'll go through some statistics about West Allis and Waukesha, city of Waukesha, et cetera, that's making it more difficult for us to have people, but it is a very real problem. And as a business owner, it is a problem that we don't think is going to go away anytime soon. So as a city resident, I also believe that fire protection, EMT service, et cetera, is vital to our community. I believe that If Delafield is going to continue growing, it's going to require more fire protection and EMT services. So this is absolutely something that I hope you as the council will take very seriously. I believe that if the facts are presented in a way, as I understand them, to the general public, this would be very well accepted as a fire fee, like your garbage service. I do believe that's a very viable option. Maybe it's not the best option, but as I understand it, that's a very easy option for us at this point. I also believe this is something that we need to do sooner rather than later. It was really scary when Matt said Thursday that from 7 a.m. Saturday until 7 a.m. on Monday, the Delafield Firehouse will be closed. I happened to witness a fire truck this morning at about 5:30 or 5:45 coming up 83, presumably from Wales, not sure where they were going, but that's already 6-7 minutes for them to get up to Delafield. And then there was an ambulance that followed. So I witnessed it today firsthand. So it's something I strongly urge you guys to consider. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Todd Stucker, 2312 Oakwood Road, and business owner 608 Genesee Street.
Can you spell your last name?
Stuckart.
And repeat that address one more time.
708 Genesee Street. As a city of Delafield, I read this at a couple of our meetings, so Matt and some other people may have already heard it, but I'm going to go through it again. As a city of Delafield resident, past Neshota resident, and a current business owner with 22 years of fire service in both communities, Neshota and Delafield, I've seen many changes when it comes to the fire service. Everything from the level of care, EMT versus paramedics, older equipment to frontline equipment, fire stations that are now suited for full-time service. Gone are the days you can rely on paid-on-call or paid-time firefighters to provide the care to citizens we have come to expect when dialing 911. Last week, I heard from there was a part-time firefighter shortage. It's just like the rest of the world's experiencing today. No wonder we are unable to build or rely on part-time needs as businesses no longer can either. COVID shutdowns, employee time commitments in their businesses, inflation where families are focused on providing for their families, along with mass retirements from the police and fire service have created a huge gap. Citizens are unaware of the gap until it makes either headline news or 911's called. Lake Country has always been viewed as raising the bar. One of the wrong decisions from the board on this could ruin the hard work of our current fire departments and communities we have built. Currently, we have multiple call ratio of about 62%, as Matt will go through some of the statistics tonight, and an 8 to 10 minute response time. Logistically, we should see to 4 to 6 minutes anywhere within our response time. Fire doubles every minute. Your chances of survival of major medical emergency drastically drops with every minute. And to know that only 38% of the time you'll get a full response with under 8 minutes is unacceptable for anywhere in the city or surrounding communities that are provided. There's been a lot of discussion last week in the past weeks as the possible failed referendum that failed in Western Lakes, none of which I feel are viable options. I feel Western Lakes failed because citizens were uneducated on the needs of the services provided by their fire departments with their PR team. Referendums are for community infrastructure such as libraries, schools, public buildings, or anything that people have a choice to use or not. Referendums should not be used to determine the level of service of police or fire being provided to them when they call 911. That said, the only viable option would be to put in place a fire-based fee as the chief will present tonight. The world has changed. We need to change with it. Now is the time to change, and change the way we are funding public service, as no community can fund it properly under the current laws. Your current fire board is put in place by the community to help guide the department and meet the needs of the community. It's time to step up, do the right thing, and propose a fire service fee. Keep the Lake Country area safe and a destination for all families to live in. As you go through as Matt goes through his presentation with the years of service I have other family members in the fire service that you could take Matt out of the equation and you could put them in there and they'd be talking the same scenario in surrounding communities in southeastern Wisconsin. I think Matt's plan is very fiscally responsible. However, being in the fire service and understanding what's going on in the world today, it is not aggressive enough, okay? So I think Matt's come up with a really good plan that could meet the city's needs and the surrounding communities, and I think we need to take it into consideration and make the right decisions, because decisions tonight could be based on whether your family receives medical care or not, or your neighbor, and I'd hate to be the one that says no. So thank you for listening, and have a good night.
Thank you for the comments. All right, anybody else? Anybody else?
Jim. I knew he'd come.
Good evening. Jim Zahorik, 1948 West Shore Drive. A resident of the city of Delafield for over 30 years. I, like as previously mentioned, have witnessed many changes in that period of time. My father, now passed away, had needed the response for medical attention 3 times. I was pleased with the response time, but that was years ago. I'm now in my father's shoes. I will be 80 years old in February. And like other people, when you dial 911, you hope there will be somebody there to help you. The chief has been spending, I'm sure, so many hours putting this together. And I've read through the proposals. I strongly endorse his position. And having been someone involved in referendums for many years, and normally I was the president of whoever was involved of that group, a referendum, as I read Western Lake's proposal, I felt it a shame that something that is that necessary failed that severely. And it failed because of the lack of education. It just was on a ballot. And if the current operating budget was 6.8 and now you're asking for an additional 6.3 for the uneducated public, they look at it, no, there's no way I'm going to do it. And Matt's idea of phasing this in, where it does not have to go to referendum, it's merely decided with you people on this board, is the way to go. I don't see an alternative. I don't want to see a failed referendum like what happened just recently with Kettle Moraine School System. They asked for a great deal. It failed. And they had to regroup. With education, it's one thing, but when your life is on the line, each month that a decision is delayed becomes more critical. And I have a grandson that is very active in Lake Country Fire and Rescue. He served in Afghanistan, he served in Romania, and he's serving our community now, and I'm very proud of him. But there are not that many people that volunteer. That's the way things are going. And we need that incentive to bring people in. And we also need the full-time. I, for one, would hate to have to wait for a call from a distant station, because the station that's within a quarter mile of us right now cannot be manned. He's doing the best he can with what he has, but he needs more help, and that help is sitting right here. Having said that, I thank you very much for your attention, and have a good evening.
Thank you for the comments. Anyone else? Anyone else? Seeing none, citizens' comments are now closed. Move on to number 5, presentation by Fire Chief Matt Fennick on significant issues with Lake Country Fire and Rescue staffing, with discussion on budgetary impacts, short and long-term funding mechanisms, and council questions and discussion regarding the same. Welcome, Chief.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor, and all the council people for letting us take up another Monday night. I know everyone is super busy, but like Kent and everyone else in the room has mentioned, this is an extremely important topic that we need to start out and get out in front of. So our board has been really working on this since about April, when the fire board at their April meeting put a work group together. That work group consisted of, get the presentation to work. 3 individuals from the fire board: Anthony Arbusius from the town of Delafield, Jeff Rumler from the village of Oconomowoc Lake, Jim Morris from the town of Genesee. Jim is also the retired fire chief of Wales Genesee Fire Department, so he has significant fire service background along with Anthony Arbusius. Anthony is a former career firefighter out of Florida. So he did a career change, came and worked in the private sector, which brought him to Wisconsin, but he's been a tremendous asset to the staffing working group and our agency as a whole. In addition to that, myself was in the work group, and Nick Heltemus, one of our battalion chiefs, has been pivotal in what we've done and put together here for you. So I know Matt and Kent have probably taken this survey before, but I'm going to ask those that haven't taken this survey, if you could grab your phone out real quick, snap that QR code, which you get out by opening your camera app, and it'll hover over it, and you can take a survey real quick. And this is just really a gauge to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our constituents, and to really find out what you expect in a number of different scenarios. So we'll take a second. It should only take about 1.5 minutes to complete it. Good. Good. Jackie, you got it? All right, awesome. Thank you for taking the time to do that. So when we talk about fire and EMS, we talk about not only what our constituents and what our customers' expectations are for when they call 911, but we also compare and contrast that to what the national standards are. And there are 2 agencies that we use and look at on a regular basis to compare our response times to the national standards and national recommendations. And those 2 agencies are the American Heart Association on the medical side and the National Fire Protection Association on the fire response side. So on the EMS side, American Heart Association recommends a response time of 8 minutes or less for somebody that's having a severe medical emergency, such as a heart attack, such as a stroke, they're not breathing, they're having a seizure, choking, anything along those kind of lines. And with those 8-minute response times or less, your statistical recovery from that drastically increases. And for every minute that goes on without that 8-minute response, your statistical recovery from that decreases exponentially. So our goal as an organization has always been to be to your doorstep within 8 minutes of that 911 call. And with that, we are doing advanced skills and procedures such as 12 lead EKGs, and we're notifying the cardiologist that we have a heart attack, and we're decreasing your time for that cardiologist to get to you whether or not they're in-house that day or they're at home because it's a night and weekend. In addition to that, we are notifying strokes early and calling stroke alerts and trauma alerts to get that staff moving. But that 8-minute response time is really pivotal in your recovery from those types of incidents. And we have seen numbers of success stories that are just awesome. So statistically on the fire side, the National Fire Protection Association, I apologize if this is blurry on the screen, but it is in all of your presentations and in our information. NFPA 1710 recommends a response time of 8 minutes or less for a structure fire. And incidentally, or not coincidentally, but this is for a 2,000 square foot or less home. Anything larger than that, they do ask for more people to be there. But that 8-minute response time is 15 firefighters to show up for that structure fire and to handle and mitigate that situation. It gives you a primary crew, a backup crew, an aerial ladder crew, an ambulance crew, and battalion chief shift commander to come and be the supervisor at that incident. And what we were experiencing last year was a response time of 8 minutes and 4 seconds. So our agency, over the course of 2021, had an average response time to all of our, or I'm sorry, a 90th percentile response time to all incidents within our 7 communities of 8 minutes and 4 seconds. And because of the staffing problems that we've had this year and the browning out of stations, which we'll get into further on down the presentation, that response time is now up to 10 minutes and 23 seconds. So we've seen a 28% increase in that response time. And we have seen negative outcomes secondary to that, one of which I'm going to show you right now. So this is a structure fire response. This is dash cam off of our battalion chief vehicle. So this is the Tahoe, marked Tahoe that you see driving around town pretty much on a daily basis. And this is a structure fire on July 16th. It came in at about 6:00 p.m. At the time, as we've mentioned before and it's been talked about, is that this is Lake Country Fire Rescue's 3rd call for service. So we're out on 2 other calls at this very moment. Statistically, if we're out on 1 call, 62% of the time we're going to be out on a 2nd call. So Steve is responding, Battalion Chief Schultz is responding out of our town of Delafield station. The Wales, Genesee station, which is right down the road from where this fire is, was out on another call. And because we were short-staffed that day, there were supposed to be 4 people at that station. There was only 2 people at that station. They were at the hospital. They were clearing Waukesha Memorial Hospital at the time. So in just a couple minutes here, I'm going to fast forward so to speed the presentation up. But you can see, let me just get there. So at the 5-minute and 32-second marks, Steve drives past the Wales, Genesee station. The lights are on, no one's home. No one is in this fire station at the moment because they're out on another call and we're short-staffed this day. So from that point, from when the point that Steve drives past the fire station and arrives on scene is 3 minutes. So we would be cutting approximately 7 minutes off the response time to this fire that he's responding to. So the situation on this fire is it is immediately noticed, so there is no delay in notification. It is a lawnmower that has started on fire in a gentleman's plastic shed adjacent to his structure. He just got done mowing the lawn on a Saturday afternoon, parked his lawnmower, as many of us do, probably time in, time out. So he parks his lawnmower. There's Steve driving past the fire station. Parks his lawnmower, goes inside, starts eating dinner. The neighbors pound on his door. A couple minutes later, your shed's on fire and your lawnmower is on fire. He tries to get there with a garden hose to try to put out the fire, but to no avail. By the time that we get there at the 10-minute and 30-second mark, you'll see the outcome of that. But the fire is well involved in the garage. The garage is fully involved and it is extending out into the kitchen and living structure of the tri-level home. You know, a lot of times we'll say, and you've probably heard it time and time again, that fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. But in a minute and a half here, you're going to actually see it. You get to see what happens when there is a delay. And the other thing that we hear time in, time out is, well, mutual aid, rely on mutual aid. And quite frankly, mutual aid is struggling just as much as we are with staffing. And the days when we would count on 20 people from a mutual aid fire department showing up to our structure fire are all but gone. In fact, the first time a mutual aid unit arrives at this incident is 18 minutes into the incident. and the closest fire engine that comes from, and it's 20 minutes away. So for us to rely on mutual aid for just that primary response, those days have changed as well. So this problem that we're facing right now is not a Lake Country Fire Rescue problem. It's not a Waukesha County Fire Service problem. It is a problem, systemic problem of the fire service in general, which has always relied on a low and free cost labor model to provide essential services to our community. And it's been talked about for quite some time, but it's at the brink of collapse, and that's what we need to get out ahead of. But you can see the smoke. You can see exactly where Steve is heading at this very moment, and he is going to pull up on a garage fire here. I'd fast forward it, but I'll probably rewind it, so we'll just watch it for the next 10 seconds. While Steve's responding to this, it's important to also mention that there's a lot going on that are behind the scenes. You can't hear the audio. These dash cameras were installed about a week and a half before we had this incident. So Steve's calling for mutual aid. He's calling to make sure that the right Mavis card is pulled up at the dispatch center and that that's been activated, because as you could see the column of smoke as he's responding, he knows that he has more fire there than he can deal with the initial response that he's doing. So simultaneously, all of these things are in motion and in action. And you see he's going to pull up here in just a second here, and he's going to back in a driveway. And Steve's role at this incident is not to fight the fire, it's to be the supervisor and manage the incident. But he pulls up, you can see that this garage at this point is pretty well involved. But pay attention to what happens here over the next minute and a half that it takes for us to get the engine on scene. You'll watch this fire double and triple in size, okay? If there was anyone in this home at this point, the home is so charged with toxic gas and toxic smoke that it's uninhabitable. They would die in seconds if they were inside this house. This gentleman did decide to go back in the house to rescue some animals, and he was lucky enough where he was able to get out of the house, thankfully. But generally, when people go back in to do things like that, rescue loved ones, rescue animals or pets, they do not come back out. So thankfully, in this instance, he was able to get there and able to do that. Yeah, it's pretty telling. So at this point, you can see the smoke pushing out of all of the eaves of the house. So every square inch of this house is charged with toxic gas, toxic smoke, and heat. And it's breached from the garage into the house, into the attic. And it's, there's not an inhabitable section in this house, maybe other than the basement, because heat rises and probably nothing's going on in the basement at this moment. So the engine's going to show up here in just a second. You see the gentleman point to where the fire is. Thank you. Thank him. We have a goal of our agency of when we roll up on scene of having water on the fire within 2 minutes of the engine arriving on scene. As an industry standard benchmark, as they get on scene, there's things they need to do. They need to grab a tool. They need to make sure that their self-contained breathing apparatus is on. Should very much note that they are short-staffed as well at this moment, because it was a short staffing day for us. There are only 3 people on this engine. There's supposed to be an ambulance that's chasing them up at this very moment. So they join up. We call the person that drives the ambulance the jumper. So that person jumps over and gets and joins up with the engine crew. But at this fire and at this incident, because of being short-staffed, they did not have the luxury of that. So they basically have 2 people that can fight this fire at this very moment, and then they have 1 person that's going to drive and operate the truck. So there's a person that has to stay out at the pump panel and make sure that water is going in the direction it needs to go and flowing through the hose lines, and also that he has a water supply established. Also, at this juncture, we do not meet the 2 in, 2 out rule, which is a state code where 2 people going into a structure can't happen until you have 4 firefighters on the scene. So thankfully, in a minute here, Chief Hoppy is going to arrive on scene as part of Pewaukee's mutual aid request, and then they do fulfill that. This is an exterior attack all day long, so they're going to pull a big hose line and they're going to put large amounts of water on this fire. They run out of water 3 times while fighting this fire because there's only 1,000 gallons of water on this pumper truck, and there's no help supporting them. So as they run out of water, they have to back out. They have to wait for water for their own safety. You're going to see them. Water is going to be applied here in just a second, and when the water is applied, you'll notice the fire diminish in size almost instantaneously, and the column of smoke switches from black to gray. Once it switches from black to gray, that's conversion, so that is a good sign, and that's what we look for. But just watch, 30 seconds of water applied to this fire makes all the difference in the world. And mind you, we are now 14 minutes into this incident. This engine should have been on scene 7 minutes ago, and if they were on scene 7 minutes ago, we would not be having a fire anywhere near the size of this. So water's on the fire at this moment. Lieutenant Anderson, who's behind me, is actually the lieutenant on that day. You see the smoke quickly switch from black to gray, so they have conversion. And this fire darkens down in almost about 30 seconds. They're going to switch positions here in just a second and try to hit it from another angle because they kind of have done what they can do from this vantage point. Again, at this moment, there is no additional help on scene. It's just the 4 individuals on this engine, or 3 individuals on this engine, plus Chief Hoppy and Chief Schultz. Jamie's dragging a large hose line up to the front of the driveway here. That is your water supply. So as soon as the next engine gets on scene, they will supply Jamie with whatever water that they have. So at this point, they're moving. They're going to run to the front of the house where they hit it from a different angle. Note that at this moment, it's just them. So if they needed to go in and they needed to make a rescue inside of this house, it's not going to happen. They have to take care of that load of fire. Our playbook for a fire of this magnitude is that the first in crew does exactly what this crew is doing. The second in crew grabs a backup hose line off of this engine, gets around to the back of the structure, enters the back of the structure, pushes this fire back out through the garage, and they mop it up, and they can do a primary search or anything like this. But at this juncture, there is no search done of this house. We do not know who's inside. We do not know who's outside, other than an account from the homeowner as to who's inside of the house. I didn't mention there's a graduation party going on next door, so there was about 40 people in the yard. And thankfully for them, they noticed this going right away because the homeowner wouldn't have noticed it until he heard something or his smoke detectors are going off inside of his house. Now at the 17-minute mark, still no help. So this is the next arriving engine. This is the engine that should have been there really first. It arrives from the Wales Genesee station. That engine had people that left Waukesha Memorial Hospital, drove back to the station, jumped in that engine, and came to this scene. So as you can imagine, there's a significant time delay with that. Their primary focus at this point is to give their water that is in their tank, give it up to the primary engine for firefighting purposes. So you're going to see them take a bit of time to get that hose line hooked up and get that hose line charged. And that is their primary objective at that moment. At this point, I believe the engine is out of water. I can't recall what exactly the time frame was. The guys told me, but it was about 18 minutes into it that they ran out of water and had to get resupplied. They ran out of water 3 total times here because, the water tenders that you see us driving around with, there was nobody to staff it. So it did not end up on the scene. The first water tender that arrived on scene was from the village of Waukesha. That water tender was summoned at the exact same time that we were summoned to this incident. It is automatically paged out as part of our response plans to respond to these calls with us as part of how we have things set up geographically, and that Chief Hoppy works so hard to make sure that playbook is set. But we use automated response plans right out of the dispatch center. So I think it's important to note that they were notified at the exact same time we were, and they still are not on scene of this incident. You're going to see a Vernon ambulance arrive on scene. I believe that is the next arriving company. They arrive on scene shortly here within about a minute, and that is your first ambulance on scene. So that would have been an ambulance that would either be assigned to the firefighters if they were sick or they got hurt doing this job, and or the homeowner or any of the occupants if they needed medical attention because of smoke inhalation, burns, or anything along that lines. But I think this, really kind of puts it into a nice, so here's your ambulance that's arriving on scene. Again, they're 19 minutes into the incident at this point. But this kind of puts a bread and butter structure fire for our agency into perspective for everyone to see. Are there things that we could take from this video and look at internally and critique and do things differently? Absolutely. But the bottom line is that if you look at the resources that we have on this scene, we are now 20 minutes into this incident, and we still do not have the NFPA recommended responders to this scene. So statistically, you can look at that and say, these are how people get hurt. These are how our constituents get hurt. Their property gets damaged, or worse yet, our responders get hurt because they're being put in a situation where they just simply do not have the people to do the job that they need to do. So the Pewaukee engine is the next arriving engine. They're going to arrive on scene here in just a minute, and then we can end the video. But the Pewaukee engine arrives over 20 minutes after the initial dispatch. And again, they were notified not on the immediate page out, but within 90 seconds of the immediate page out. The Pewaukee engine came from basically WCTC. That's where they responded from. So Pewaukee is going to arrive on scene, and we are now just over 21 minutes into the incident. So quick summary, fire and EMS is probably one of the most basic forms of government. We think and we know, based on the survey that you filled out earlier, that when citizens call 911, they have a general expectation of what they will receive when they call 911 and the time frame that it's going to show up in. We've been discussing fire department staffing for decades. I know it's been talked about at the city of Delafield level, going back and just applaud the city of Delafield for slowly taking the steps needed to start to address this problem. But we can go back and find newspaper clippings from almost 40 years ago talking about the model that the fire service uses to staff its departments and staff for daily needs of the organization and the communities. Our minimum staffing guidelines, those are guided by national response standards, American Heart Association, the National Fire Protection Association. And again, I just want to reiterate that staffing in nearly all paid on call and part-time departments is at crisis level right now. So what's the crisis? So this, I hope you can see this, but it is in your packet. So if you want to look to your packet for it to be a little bit clearer for you, this is a day in the life of Lake Country Fire. So each one of those red shift, green shift, and blue shift represents 24 hours of time. Our crews work a 24-hour period of time followed by 2 days off. Right now they're working the 4896, but it's the same type of schedule where they work a 24-hour block of time followed by a period of time off. That is nationally the standard and the norm for fire departments. We do not work traditional eight-hour shifts in 3-shift rotations, first shift, third shift, first, second, third. At our organization, it's called red, green, and blue. Some other organizations, it's A, B, and C shift, but it's the same general concept. As you look at the top of these org charts here, the colors that are shaded in, I'll call it orangish. Sorry, I don't know my color chart, but orangish, those are all representative of full-time positions. So those are all individuals that are career responders with our organization, whether or not they're a battalion chief, a captain, lieutenant, and or a firefighter paramedic. The positions shaded in purple and yellow are part-time individuals and intern individuals. So interns are was one of the fire department's solutions to the staffing problem that we had. And intern programs are used in thousands of fire departments across the United States as a bridge the gap for staffing. And in December of last year, intern programs were dealt a significant blow by the Department of Labor, where the Department of Labor declared basically that those positions, which we were paying with a living stipend and college tuition, are now required to be paid minimum wage. So as you can imagine, free and low-cost labor multiplied out by minimum wage is quite expensive. The positions shaded in purple are part-time individuals and paid-on-call individuals. That is the other part of the model that is really struggling. As Mr. Newmiller mentioned in his comments earlier, any agency or organizations that's relying on part-time individuals to provide staffing for them is struggling post-COVID, and the fire departments are going to be hit exceptionally hard with that for some stuff I'll get into in just a minute. But does anyone have any questions on our daily staffing and how we are where we are today? Thank you. So what's the crisis? So the decline in paid on-call and part-time staff, this has been happening over the last 20 years as organizations have really, I'll call it the sense of volunteerism, the sense of community. You see it all across all levels of really government and people volunteering to be on park boards and plan commissions and different things like that, all the way up to your PTO organization at your local school, the Lions Club, the Masonic gentlemen. So it's really happening at all levels of that volunteerism. So much so that really over the last 2 years, we lose staff at a 5-to-1 ratio. So five people are leaving for every one person that we bring on. So our burn rate's 80% on them. The other thing that's happening across the board is a paradigm shift in how career agencies, which I'll call the city of Waukesha, city of Brookfield's, Milwaukee suburbs of the world, hire staff. Up until January 1st of this year, the industry standard is that if you wanted to be hired as a full-time firefighter for any one of those agencies, you had to have your firefighter EMT certifications, along with your paramedic certification and your about 60 college credits or associate level type credits. January 1st of this year, the first department changed the way that they hire, and they dropped their hiring requirements to firefighter EMT. So the individuals that I would get and keep, or our organization would get and keep and train to be paramedics, because we would hire them at that firefighter EMT level. They would be a firefighter EMT with us for about 18 months before they would be ready to go to paramedic. We would send them to paramedic and get to keep them and mentor them and coach them through paramedicine. And then we would generally keep them for about 6 to 8 months after they got their paramedic license before they would be hired off. Now they are being hired before we can even hire them, because the same individuals that we're paying $14 and $16 an hour for to work part-time with our agency can go work at one of those aforementioned fire departments, be paid $60,000 a year starting and top out at $80,000. And that's before any overtime, and that includes health insurance, retirement benefits, everything along the lines. So it's really no wonder why we're starting to see the issues that we have. But in January, the first agency switched the way that they hire, and every single one of them has followed suit since then. There has been a number of retirements in the fire service over the last really 2 years. It's post-COVID. For a number of reasons, but probably one of the bigger reasons, and the other reason for the 80% burn rate, is that COVID in the year 2020 and 2021 was the second leading killer of firefighters secondary to heart disease in the nation. So 2 individuals local and close to us that were paid on call individuals. One gentleman worked for North Prairie Fire Department, spent 35 years volunteering for that organization, got COVID on a call and ultimately died because of that illness that he received. Similar situation out in Ixonia. A female who was in her early 30s, healthy individual, responded to a call as a volunteer, paid on call person for the Ixonia Fire Department, contracted COVID from that and passed away. So it starts to make you question, why am I spending time volunteering at my local fire station or paying for the rate that they get paid? If I'm going to take that home to my loved one, my family, or anyone along the lines of that. So 50% of our daily schedule is filled with those low-cost employees. So that was kind of back to the other slide where you could see the color change there. The top half of that schedule of our 12 people that we have on duty 24/7, 365 is filled with full-time career individuals. The bottom half is the low and free cost labor that we're really talking about. So when 50% of our daily schedule relies on those employees and they aren't there, it forces us to do things that we're not comfortable doing. And as somebody mentioned earlier, this last weekend, and only because they were at the Thursday meeting that we had, our annual meeting, but this last weekend, the City of Delafield Fire Station was closed from basically 5 p.m. until 7 o'clock this morning. So when we do that, it's called browning out a fire station. It happened for 13 days in July and 12 days in the month of August. So almost half of the month of July, and again, almost half of the month of August. As we're back in school session now, it's becoming an increasing struggle, as you can see with just what we had last weekend. So we talked about this earlier, but it's created a 28% increase in response times. So 804 in 2021, we hit those marks perfectly. And that's something to be very proud of as an organization that deals with the geography and the lakes that we deal with on a daily basis. This year, up through the month of July, this hasn't been updated with August statistics as of yet, but it's at 10 minutes and 23 seconds. So you can see the direction that we're heading, which is why we're here talking about this. So the constraints, and again, I apologize, this is probably very hard for you to read, but it is in your packet. So what are the constraints on us? Why can't we just simply grow through this? And I'll say as a consolidated fire department or a joint fire department, we have a gift. That gift is that our budget can increase by CPI plus 2% every single year outside of the levy requirements that are imposed upon all of the municipalities in the state of Wisconsin. And that CPI plus 2 barely allows us to keep the lights on. In a year of inflation like we've had this year, it doesn't. We have to do some things creatively to meet those numbers. But what you have before you here is an example of a 5% increase in our budget to the communities. So our annual budget to the communities last year was $2.2 million. 5% of that allows us to raise our budget by $110,000. When you take in a 7% average cost of insurance increase and cost of Wisconsin retirement system increase that is really kind of unfunded mandates put on down us, fuel increase, a 2% cost of living increase, which doesn't keep up with inflation and doesn't keep up with our neighboring agencies, it really leaves us with $15,000 left to do any sort of addition to any staff. The numbers just don't work out. So taking that $15,000 and accounting for 0 other increases across the board, which we know aren't possible. We get price increases handed down to us by all of our manufacturers, and capital is just a whole nother presentation in and of itself. With this example before you, it would take us 8.2 years to hire one full-time individual. To get the agency fully staffed, it would take over 200 years to do it. The math just doesn't work out. So what's the need? What do we need as an organization? So on July 12th, we rolled out the initial plan to our board of directors in a special meeting, just very much similar to this. And that plan and all that the staffing group has put together and really worked on since April is to add 23 headcount to the organization. As we looked at that as an organization and we brought it to the board, that's a monumental ask. It's very expensive. We understand that, and as such, the board said that we need to find a different way to do this. We need to find a phase-in type approach to make this more palatable, where we need to crawl, walk, and then we need to run as an organization. So we went back to the staffing group. We had a couple more meetings, and we really looked at the overall needs of the organization and figured out how we could do it. And we did it in a phase-in plan over 4 years, where we would hire 7 staff in 23, 6 in 24, 6 in 25, and another 3 staff in 2026. This allows the organization to grow slowly. It also allows us to grow at what I will call an attainable pace, because we know with the current job market, if we were to have 23 funded positions next year, there's no way that we could fill all of those positions fill them in general, and then fill them with the quality candidates that are going to protect the needs of our communities. This is really more palatable as an organization. It is achievable as an organization, where we kind of do this phase-in period over time. So in the year 2023, this is what this looks like. So you compare and contrast this to the first slide in the first chart that you saw, and you'll see that over time, slowly the purple and yellow boxes convert over to the orange colored boxes, and we slowly hire staff. 7 next year to round it out, 6 the year after, 6 the year after, and then 3. In the presentation, I just have 2023 in there because really what we're talking about is right now the immediate need for 2023. So we stop closing that fire station and we get back to an agency that can respond 24/7, 365 and start getting back to those response times that we had last year. So what's the cost? What does this look like? So the cost of those employees next year, the 7 employees that we mentioned, plus rounding out the intern program to make budget, is $923,234. The year after that, it goes an additional $969, $914, and then the out year of 2026, those 3 firefighter EMTPs are budgeted at $550. And I'll say that obviously everything 2024, 25, and 26, those are estimated numbers. Using what I'll call good faith estimates with what we know our labor rates are going to increase at and what we anticipate health insurance, work comp, and those types of things increasing at. So that's that. Any questions so far? Right. So funding mechanisms. How do we fund this, right? This is the lion in the room. And the answer to that is really there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. What one community does in our 7 communities, what we first thought is that all 7 would really need to go to referendum, and that's not the case. As we've done more research, as we've done more diving into this solution or problem and what solutions are, there are multiple different avenues that we can explore and we can discuss. But I think the first thing that we need to focus on as Lake Country Fire Rescue and with partners with our 7 communities is how do we get through 2023, because the referendum approach is extremely long, and I would hate to go a whole nother year with no staffing down here, because I didn't mention before, I'll mention again, but right now we have 20 paid on or part-time paid on call individuals that are picking up part-time shifts on a regular basis in our organization. 18 of those part-time paid on-call people are marketable and seeking careers in the fire service. So we can say with almost certainty that this problem will continue to get better until we start to take some steps as an organization to make it better. So it can be funded in a number of different ways. The first way is something that we've thrown out at the fire board level, and we threw out last week at our community annual meeting, but that is to enact a fire fee, and it's very similar to the way that garbage is done. We do need to learn a lot more about this approach, which at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, we have a presentation that's being put on, and we're getting some training where all of the administrators have been invited to it too, so we can start to dive into this as we understand time is of the essence in your budget cycle and our budget cycle. The second approach is quite simply to disregard the levy limits. I'm not advocating for it. It's just an approach and a tool that's in your toolbox to use. But at this rate, probably not a too viable of option. And the last approach is a referendum. So the referendum, what's the timeline on it, right? So referendum from implementation, or I'm sorry, phase concept to implementation is 20 months. So at this point, we really started discussing this in March. The quickest you could have something on your ballot for referendum would be April of next year with a go-live date of January of 2024. So that leaves us all of next year with brownouts and reduced staffing in a situation that will continue to get better before it gets worse. So as an agency, we are doing everything that we can to make this situation better. We generate revenue unlike any other agency. That's thanks to our fire board under the leadership of Matt Grimmer, who really looks at everything from a level and that we appreciate and vets it before it goes into action. So our interfacility transport program has generated millions of dollars to not only the city of Delafield, to Lake Country Fire Rescue, and now to the 7 partners. So we do that unlike most fire departments. We are one of 2 non-tech college-based training centers. So the training center generates revenue for the organization. But secondly, and more importantly, it allows us to train the next generation of firefighters. It allows us to bring the next generation of firefighters up into our organization. And we are starting this recruitment process really their freshman year of high school. So their freshman year of high school, our staff is in the high school, Kettle Moraine and Arrowhead, talking to them about the fire service. They get some basic first aid classes. Their sophomore year of high school, they are allowed to do what's called Life at the Firehouse. It's a 6-week program that we do with sophomores in high school, and we really show them what the fire service is all about, what we do on a daily basis. We have the blessing of the training center where we have a training house inside the training center where they're able to advance hose lines. They're able to do it in a simulated environment in turnout gear with SCBA on. And find out if this is something for them and they want to do this as a career. But sometimes also they figure out that this is more than they really signed up for. But it allows us to do that at that young age. We've been pretty successful with it. 2 of our last 4 hires have been individuals that have come up through that program. One of which being somebody that was mentored by Battalion Chief Schultz as his sophomore year, and he'll come up right up to you and tell you that he didn't know what he was going to do for a career path, and because of the Life at the Firehouse program, he found his calling, and he's just been a great asset to our organization. So again, the training center generates revenue for our organization, but it also allows us to provide that next generation. And the third thing that's not mentioned in the presentation is it's a cost savings to us because we're able to do all of our paramedic and continuing education really free of charge. So we don't charge our employees for it, and also we don't the agency isn't being charged. If they all went to WCTC, it's about $450 per person every 3 years to get that continuing training. We have a reputation, our organization has a reputation as a destination, and that reputation is the same reason that we all live in these communities. These are amazing communities to live in. They're amazing communities to recreate in, grow a family in, send our children to school, and let them learn through the education system that we have here. But that reputation as a destination is quite frankly in jeopardy at the moment. We continue to run short-staffed. That has an attrition rate on our staff as they're doing more, continuing to do more with less. They're being put in situations such as you saw in that structure fire, where they operate on a structure fire scene for almost 10 minutes without any additional help. Had they been in that building and something bad had happened to them, there would have been no one there to rescue them, which when you have to go home every day after shift and report back to your loved ones and wife and children or husband and children at home, that's sometimes very hard to do. In our current budget situation that we have, we are funded 60% by municipalities and 40% by fees for service. So those fees are the interfacility transports that we do, their ambulance transports, their fire inspection, 2% dues that we receive from the state. So it's a 60-40 really split on municipal contributions to fees for service or self-generated income, if you will. And then when you compare that to our average comparable departments that are around us, it's an 81-19. So it's an almost a 20% increase in municipal contributions compared to what we're doing as an organization. And again, that's a lot of thanks to the fire board, their guidance and their wisdom that have us operating in that way. So where do we stack up when you compare our spending to other comparable departments? And when I say comparable departments in here, we should first note that the Western Lakes numbers in here are what they were proposing with the referendum. But secondly, these are departments that are meeting the needs of their communities at this moment. These are full-time staffed agencies or agencies that have some combination people but are on the way to full-time staff. You won't notice any what I'll call part-time agencies in this slide because they are struggling through the same problem that we are. So how do we stack up? So our average spending across our 7 municipalities is 39 cents per thousand of assessed value on the property tax bill. The others that are comparable to us is almost $1 more at $1.32 per thousand. So it's easy to kind of see some disparity there and see where we stack up. Kudos to the fire board on that 60-40 split. but you can also see where we need to head to be a viable agency in the future. There's been a lot of talk about this. There's been a lot of talk at the community level, at the board level, and the department level. So much so that we created a link on our website. So if you go to lakecountryfire.com/staffing, you will have a link to not only this presentation, but the 8-page document that was included before you. There's also, that's the executive summary document. And then in addition to that, there's tons of supporting documentation out there, newspaper clippings, things from recent time and things from back from last year. But the one that really strikes home is an article or a study that was done by the Wisconsin Policy Forum, an independent third-party agency on Wisconsin's fire service, and it's titled "The Fire Service: Is It in Need of Resuscitation?" And we're at that point, and it's hard for us to ask for help, but we're at the point where we need to get that help. So that's all I really have as part of the presentation. I thank you for letting me chew up an hour of your Monday night. I'm starting to get the time down. I appreciate your time, and I'll open it up to questions. So,
Chief, I'm going to start us off. I don't want my comments to be interpreted as opposition to the plan or anything like that. I just want the council to understand the deliberation that the fire board went through and some of the questions that were already asked and answered. And I'm not sandbagging the chief. He's already answered these multiple times already. So I've been informing the council for 9-10 months now about the situation. And could you explain a little bit more about the initial understanding was that we were going to move to referendum in April, but that kind of changed dramatically with starting in July.
Correct.
With the brownouts. So can you speculate on what happened during that time that changed it?
A couple of things happened. Is up until July 1st, we hadn't browned a fire station out that was supposed to be staffed. I mean, we should also be very clear to everyone that we have 2 unstaffed stations in our organization. They have never been staffed, and that is the Neshota station, which has interns that live there. There's right now 3 interns that live up there, but they're not on any regular call schedule. They have no assignments to be on such. It's purely a benefit if they're there and they're able to respond on calls, and they first respond to those calls. And the Shaniqua station has not been staffed it was always only staffed with part-time people, and as those part-time people or paid on call individuals have really retired from the fire service or moved, the Shaniqua station has not been staffed. Shaniqua is gracious enough where they have a townhouse that's behind their village hall. If you drive past there ever, they rent that fire station, or the fire station, they rent that house to 2 individuals under the stipulation that they have to be employees of Lake Country Fire Rescue for a drastically reduced rate, rental rate. So there are one of our full-time employees and her sister live in that house, and they respond out of that station, but there's no regular call cycle or call schedule out of that station. So up until July 1st, we hadn't browned out a fire station ever. And because of a hiring process that happened in a neighboring fire department, full-time wise, where we lost a number of key individuals, it forced us to start to brown that fire station out. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is that the 20 people that are really actively picking up hours within our organization and the 18 people that are seeking careers in the fire service. And we anticipate that number is going to get smaller as those individuals are hired. So the urgency really became met. And I'll go back and say we've lived through cycles like this in the past where we've been short on people, and we would run a hiring process and we would gain another 5, and we would run another hiring process and we would gain 3 to 5, and we would get back up to where we need to be. And the first 2 hiring processes that we ran, one in March, one in May, we had 0 applicants in those processes. 0 applicants to be firefighter EMTs, 0 applicants to be firefighter paramedics, part-time wise. So when you lost those individuals that got hired as part of that hiring process, and there's nobody coming out behind them, is what really has exacerbated the problem. And like I mentioned time and time again, the numbers that we see in terms of hiring and part-time processes are not unlike anything anyone else is seeing. So much so that some people have gotten really creative in how they advertise and how people are traveling from all across the state. But it's that is what has accelerated the problem, or I'll call it accelerated the plan, if you will. And the second, really, quite frankly, was when the board asked to do some sort of phase-in plan. We were watching closely and talking to our peers west of us as to what was going on. And when we discovered the phase-in plan and we discovered the ability for the fire fee to be put in place, in my mind, that was a pivot point in this whole discussion. Because I knew the 20-month cycle that we would be in front of us. The referendum is not a given. You saw the results that you had in the referendum. They hired a PR agency. If you're on social media and you like their Facebook page, you couldn't get away from their referendum for 3 months. It was in front of you. They were boosting the advertisements and doing all of that. So they spent a ton of capital and they spent a ton of time educating, I think. But at the end of the day, we as an agency have to get up to the plate and bat 7 for 7 on a referendum.
And Chief, and just to summarize, I don't want the impression to be left because it's incorrect that we were somehow caught off guard. We were not.
Correct.
And since you mentioned it, how much did Western Lakes spend on their marketing? Again, these are rhetorical questions, but
I believe it was $100,000.
Thank you.
I don't know the factual on that, but somewhere in that ballpark. Correct. And I want to be very clear, I'm not advocating or asking for that from this body. I know your stance on that. But again, Matt, that's why we've put together the executive summary. That's why we trying to make all of this stuff out and open to the public. We've been involved, and Kent, thank you, have given this same presentation to the Lions Club, to the Wales Business Group. I mean, I'm out trying to spread the word as much as possible with different civic groups and different bodies to get the word out there to really what's happening. So
another point of debate was our response time and how you characterize our community based on our response time. Are we rural? Are we urban? Are we semi-rural? Obviously, if you're very rural, the response time expectation is different. My personal opinion is the American Heart Association says 8 minutes, and your heart doesn't know if you're in rural Wisconsin or downtown Milwaukee, and it's not going to beat any longer just because you're up north. But I did want you to maybe address that difference.
Sure. Yeah, the National Fire Protection Association does 2 different classifications. We'll call it combination and we'll call it career. We, as an agency, have put ourselves into that career bucket in terms of response times. NFPA, if you get to 1720, it allows you for another minute or so on that response time out there. But, I think it's very important to note in here, the NFPA 1710 is an 8-minute response time for the 15 members to be on scene. We're not advocating for that. I think it's, in the resources that we have available, what we're advocating for is one piece of equipment to be on scene within that 8-minute response time. Geographically, these are difficult communities to protect because they have bodies of water that dissect them through the middle of them, especially the city of Delafield, village of Oconomowoc Lake, Shaniqua. So you have to take that into account. That we know 100% that the funds are not there to staff this in that manner, but we're asking to get that engine on scene within 8 minutes. I think if you watch the video, that was a 10-minute response time for us for that battalion chief to show up. From what we know is an almost zero notification time. So you'll hear We'll get things that are called in. Somebody calls in the house on fire across the lake. But you know, in the middle of winter, never fails. Once every 3 or 4 years, you'll get somebody that calls in a house fire across the lake in the middle of the night, and it's an actual house fire. That fire's been burning for a long time from someone across the lake to notice it. This is a different situation that you saw before you. It's a 0 notification time. Somebody noticed that fire almost instantly and went and banged on the door and called 911. It was one of the 40 members, 40 or so people over at the graduation party next door. So we know for almost certainty that it's a 0 notification time. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and you can also reference what are our citizens' expectations? What are your neighbors? How, you know, when do they expect someone from EMS to show up? Is it 8 minutes? Is it 6 minutes? Is it 10 minutes?
You know, Matt, that's part of that survey that we give in the beginning of this presentation. And after the survey, I'm happy to share that out with Tom and the Common Council. But that survey has been given now, I want to say, in excess of 70 times. And we know for almost certainty, you know, near 90%, that the expectation of our constituents is 8 minutes or less when their house is on fire. And it's 8 minutes or less, overwhelmingly 8 minutes or less when they're having a medical emergency or their loved one isn't breathing. So,
one of the things that I've brought up and argued for unsuccessfully with the board is peak and trough staffing. Mm-hmm. I work in healthcare. We peak and trough staff all the time based on call volume. The emergency room is staffed higher at certain times during the day than they are other times, just based on call volume. I advocated to adopt something similar. Got nowhere with it. But can you comment why, in your opinion, just on I think the argument against it, the argument against it is a cultural difference or a cultural expectation, not cultural in terms of diversity, but cultural in terms of fire culture.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to answer the question, but
right.
Why is my plan why can't my plan work? Because I love it, and I think it would work, but it's getting nowhere.
The first answer to that is that our crews work 24-hour shifts. So that is actually part of their union contract, that they work those 24-hour rotating shifts. So on the full-time wise, that would be almost impossible to achieve. On the part-time side, part of that is included in the 2023 budget, is where we're doing some of that peak and trough staffing to start to take into account of that. But the other reason for it, Matt, really is that statistically, while the number of incidents that we have decrease in the what we'll call the 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. window, the acuity of those incidents is statistically higher than any other, you know, time frame comparatively. So the other thing that we look at as an organization is, for the most part, our 7 communities are bedroom communities where people are out and about. They work in maybe a different community, maybe not with COVID anymore. Maybe a lot of them work from home. But the nighttime hours is when they're home. When they're sleeping is when they're home. When fires occur at night, when somebody is sleeping in a house, traditionally that's when we have negative outcomes, because if they can't rescue themselves because of a condition or they don't notice it, that is statistically when you see your highest fire fatality marks. And I'm just going to point last night into this equation. We had 12 incidents between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. this morning, and we were browned out. Twice we had to call mutual aid over, once from the city of Waukesha. The second one was going to be Heartland, but we had a crew clear, and they were able to take care of it. Some of those were storm-related calls. Some of those were flood-related calls, as you can imagine, but there was EMS, high-acuity EMS calls mixed into the middle of it. So while I certainly agree with you that peak and trough staffing is something that we look at in the future, I think we have to get to our 12 people 24/7, and then as we look to the future, yes, absolutely. I mean, you talk about looking at things statistically as an organization. You know, we know our summer months are a busier month, so doing some things in regards to that makes 100% sense. doing things, over holiday weekends where we know statistically the population of these communities, some of them Shaniqua doubles, if not triples over those periods. And those would be the great time to look at doing some of what you're talking about. To Matt's point, and Matt's absolutely correct, he's advocated for it. There are also other people on the board that have advocated for 5 people in each station 24/7. So there is I will say there is some differences in opinion there. But, and I think it's really important to point out is we're looking to do 4 people 24/7 in the stations, and we're looking to do that over the course of that 4-year plan. The industry norm, and I think what was being proposed west of us, but if you get in a Waukesha, Brookfield, they have 5 and 6 people in each station 24/7. So we're still what I would call lean in regards to that, but we're at a thing that will certainly meet the needs of our agency and of our customers. The other, I think, really important part to point, as long as I'm on this topic, is we are not adding anyone to our daily schedule. So as you look through that executive summary, you'll notice that those boxes don't add on the bottom of the equation. They stay the same. We're just converting over. So when Chief Kozlowski, Chief Moon, and I put this together in 2020 and 2021, we had targeted those 12 individuals. That has not changed. We are still targeting 12 individuals 24/7. We are just merely at a point where we need to convert those over to what I'll call a more reliable model.
Hey, Chief, when you first started trying to hire part-time and you had very, very poor success, or 0, what you said, going to full-time, well, you think that will change, that you will get the candidates in?
Yeah, I do. I really do, Paul. I think that our organization has a reputation as a destination, kind of like some of the things I touched on before, same reasons that we want to live and work here. They want to come here. I think best said is that you get in some other larger organizations, and there's a difference in the acuity of calls. There's a difference in kind of how they view public safety in general. And our organization has a tremendous level of respect from our citizens. They call 911 most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, because they truly have an emergency and they need help, whether or not that's because their loved one isn't breathing, or sometimes it's as simple as Mrs. Smith needs a battery changed in her smoke detector, and we will go out and help with those type of things. But we get into this profession, all of us, I think I can speak for all of us, because we want to help people and we want to help them when they truly need it. And that is what happens out here, is people call 911 because they really need help. And that allows us to be that destination where the acuity of calls makes people think, and it makes you use the skills that you go to school for, versus running in larger organizations where maybe that acuity isn't there. And there are some more people that utilize the system more often than not. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But
If you went for a fee-for-service like they're talking about here, or an extra, a nickel onto the tax rate or whatever, what would those numbers actually be?
We're still finding out those exact dollar figures. We've presented some to the board, and it really becomes down to, like we mentioned, that education we're getting tomorrow, as to how that would be distributed. But there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to it. I think you can see, in part of the presentation, there's some numbers there. But the community really ultimately has the say in how you distribute the increase in cost. You could distribute it by strictly parcels. So there are 11,232 parcels in our response area. If we took it just at that level, the increase would be around $82 per parcel. There are some communities that have expressed a desire to approach it a little bit differently and maybe do some things with commercial property versus a residential property. So really it is up to this body to decide how that is distributed across the city of Delafield. I've heard some things in other communities that are looking to do this, where they may do it on lot square footage or assessed value. And really ultimately that is in your privy and your one of the ultimate hard decisions that if that's a route you choose to go, that you would do. But one thing that we need to be very clear in is that if you go the fire fee route, and this is something that Tom and I and Amy are educating ourselves on almost daily here, is there's a look back period to 2013. For whatever reason, the state picked 2013. So we've got to go and look at 2013 and figure out what you paid for fire service in 2013, back that out of the situation, and then it would come into the fire fee. So when I say the $82, I'm using that number across the 11,232 parcels, but the city of Delafield would have to bucket in their loss out of what their levy is. So there's a lot of moving parts to this right now. I completely understand the urgency as we are, the budget cycle is quickly approaching us. And it was why Tom and I are trying to meet on a pretty regular basis here when we know things, and really we have an administrators meeting, so the training is tomorrow, and we have an administrators meeting on Thursday, luncheon on Thursday. So we get together with the administrators once a quarter, and this will probably take up the majority of that meeting is finding the different approaches as to how to do it. So I don't know that it's the end all be all. I'll be very clear with that. I think it's a tool that you can utilize in your toolbox, but I don't think it's the end all be all. The thing that I would encourage all of you to do and everyone in this room to do is reach out to their state legislatures, because this problem is at the state level.
That was going to be my question.
Yes. I have sent a letter to Senator Kapenga. I've had coffee with Senator Kapenga in early June about this situation and explained it to him. I gave him a number of different options that he could look at doing, because I believe in not only just telling you that there's a problem, but trying to find solutions to that problem. And I've met with Cindy Duco and Senator Allen, or Representative Allen, I'm sorry, because there are three areas, area reps. But I would encourage all of you and everyone in the room to reach out to those people, because that is this problem originates at the state level with levy caps. Had these not been in place, this is something that you can easily grow into over the period of time. And it kind of, I know the numbers are staggering. They're staggering to me. When you look at the numbers as a whole, it's really the equivalency of Lake Country Fire asking the city of Delafield to, we have 7 communities. Next year, we're going to hire 7 individuals. It's 1 person per community. And in the out years, in the 6, it's less than that. So, when you look at the numbers, they're staggering. But remember that those are over a $6 billion asset in terms of equalized value. So, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
Well, I think the system that we've been using with part-timers, the system that we've been using was working, and it doesn't anymore, straight up. So we need to adjust. We need to look at, and there are options, but I do think it does start at the state, but we still need to do something now. I know my constituents, I can safely say, would be appalled if they were really aware of the fact that there were nobody home at the fire station. And that's a very powerful statement right there.
Chief, do you think the current system will ever come back as a cycle, or is it just done?
Paul, I wish I could say that it would. I wish I could say that 2 years from now something's going to come back. I wouldn't put any sort of bet on it. And I think maybe pro to the phase-in plan is that if it were to come back, we can pivot. We can pivot as an organization, and one day I hope I sit in this chair and say we've got 60 paid on call people and we're rocking and rolling. I just know that's probably not going to be the case. But I think that's a pro to the phase-in plan. If you look at the referendum approach, it really locks you into taking whatever figure that is before you, and whether or not we do that in a series of a referendum in 2023 for 2024 and maybe another planned one, as long as we're clearly communicating this in the out years. I think the all-in-one approach, where it's that large dollar figure all at once, as much as everyone supports it, I think that's a tall ask, and I think we need to take some notes from some things that happened in August here. So, even if you phase it in, but when you phase it in, that's the amount that, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're basically locked into taking that amount. And if you don't take it, whatever you don't give to Lake Country Fire, because maybe we say, okay, well, we've found some more part-time people and we don't need to do it, you have to earmark in your reserve fund for fire protection use. It can't be creatively put over to do anything else with it. So it can only be used for that specific reason.
But
Correct me if I'm wrong.
you can tax less than what the public approved in the referendum.
Okay.
Like, for instance, the city approved a referendum for $257,000 per year. But in the first year that we were allowed to take that, we only utilized $190,000 of it.
I'd also comment that I think there was a surprise that the Western Lakes referendum failed. And my opinion is that it is, and that irrespective of 2023, the only funding mechanism at our disposal for 23 is a fee, essentially. But to not ask because you're afraid of the answer you might get is problematic for me, in light of the Western Lakes referendum failing.
Chief, the way you explained that to me earlier, the other Western Lakes referendum, each one of those units had to pass it. If one out of the 7 or whatever says no, the whole thing is out?
Correct.
The same thing would happen here?
Well, I don't know that to be the case anymore. I think the things that we're learning, because we're learning as we go through this, is that there is not that one-size-fits-all approach. So there may be a community that chooses to, maybe that community chooses to not take their share of state aid and they just exceed their levy. Maybe they choose to enact a fire fee, or they choose to fund it through fund balance, or however they do it. And they don't choose to go the referendum route. We don't have to go up to the plate and bat 7 for 7. In just talking in the straw poll that I get from some of the communities is I don't want to speak for any of our other partners, but some communities may choose to just do the fire fee, may exceed the levy. There's another number of tools that they may be utilizing to do it.
So it's not a one fail, all fail.
Yes, it's not a one fail, all fail approach.
Yeah,
But it
introduces an interesting
it does. If
scenario where the
Delafield
people
fails,
say we don't want it.
yeah. Let's say Delafield goes to referendum in April and it fails, but the other 6 communities decide to go through a fire fee. Now you're underfunded by 40%.
Definitely put some hurdles into the way.
Or conversely, if we went to a fire fee, we would need all the other communities to go to a fire fee for this to completely work.
No, they could do the fire fee, they could do the referendum, they could do give up their share of the state shared aid and ignore the levy limits.
Everybody needs to participate
Yeah.
somehow.
Yes,
It could be a mixed bag, but
correct.
we need 7 out of 7.
Yes.
We're only voting for Delafield, so we have no control over the other ones. Do you have any feel where those guys are going, the other districts?
Chief's eternally optimistic.
I would say I don't think it's fair to comment on any of the other communities right now because I haven't gotten it. There's been no community that's put a motion forward and said yes, go for it. I will say that this is not the first time I've given this presentation, hence I've got it down under an hour. But it's the reception that I get from it is committed to finding a solution. And what we have currently isn't working, and we need to find that solution.
I don't think we have an option. I don't think we have an option.
Well, and I can comment on other communities. I don't care who I offend. I think they're likely going to fire fees. I would think Kachi Shaniqua going to fire fees. Shota, I think, is probably going to a fire fee, and I don't know about Wales, Genesee, but I think they are too. I think that's where I see them, just speculating. The town and the city, Those are the wild cards.
I like the idea of the fire fee because of the visibility to the citizens. Here's a number, here's what it's for, puts it in front of them, and I think it's something that they'll appreciate and understand. This is something of high value, and here's what it costs me. I think that's very palatable, and again, it's very good visibility for what you're getting and what you're paying for it.
I can't imagine too many people saying, you want a first-class fire department, it's going to cost you $7 a month. Who the heck's going to say, no, I don't want that, I want it $5 a month? I mean,
I
really?
cannot tell you the support, the strong support we get for our up the drive service for our garbage, and I would think our firefighters are. When we were negotiating back a few
We'll
years
talk about
ago.
that next Monday.
No, no, I'm just saying that people called me. No,
You're going to be needing to add a lot of items.
I just think they're going to value our firefighters more. Is where I'm headed with this statement, and so I agree that to me it's like no, they get that. We need this, and yeah, I think it's more palatable than formulas. I mean, it's just like here's a fee, and people go, okay.
So that was the same argument. I'll play devil's advocate. Then how do you explain Western Lakes? How do you explain that referendum failed? And then how do you justify saying we're just going to enact a fire fee ad infinitum?
Well, I think.
And not ask your opinion.
Oh, well, for me,
I mean,
think, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I love devil's advocates, by the way. But no, I really do because it makes you think. But I think what happened with that is that they spent $100,000, and right away people become suspect of it. Well, why are they spending all this money to raise money, whereas a fire fee is just very straightforward? So I think if the KISS principle, keep it simple, it's better that way, in my simple mind.
And I think you look at a number like that, whether it's 82 or 382, it's different than a referendum for X $1 million. It's a little more shocking than going, okay, I've got this line item, this is my share. It's a
Or like Paul said,
number I can
$7 a
manage.
month or $10 a month. You
Sure.
go,
Yeah.
really?
And it was argued on the town, and I wasn't privy to this, but we are a republic. This isn't, you're elected, we're elected to weigh the facts and make judgments, and if the people don't like it, they can vote you out.
Yeah.
Ready? Any other questions for the chief? All right, well, thank you very much for coming in. It was very informational. I even learned something new, and even though it's the 4th or 5th time I've seen it.
Come to the 6th.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief.
And thank you for your service. You guys are amazing.
All right, seeing no further business, we are now adjourned at 7:33.
Thanks, Matt.